Hello friends, welcome to the Seated Scribe, a channel where we discuss pens and writing, and I am Rudrashish Dotto. For today's review, I have a product from ASA, a pen manufacturing company based out of Chennai, which specializes in crafting handcrafted Ebonite pens. The pen that I have today is a fine nib version of ASA Nauka, one of the most popular brands in the ASA umbrella. I have a pen in a fine nibbed version in full Ebonite make with matte black color, and let me now go to the pen to see how the pen fares under actual writing circumstances. So without any further delay, let us go to the pen. Well friends, ASA usually dispatches their pens to most parts of India as well as outside India through the National Indian Post, and in this case I have received their product from Chennai, where they usually manufacture their pens through speed post. So let me open this envelope, and here is the inner wonderfully designed pouch which actually houses the pen. So these pouches are either designed out of cotton fabric or jute. In this case, this is made of jute with these wonderfully decorated designs and the ASA emblem stitched on the pouch. So this is a one of a kind thing that we usually do not find among fountain pen manufacturers, and it's a no nonsense container at that. There is a pouch which I'll be keeping aside, and this is the pen. This is ASA Nauka as they call it, which in most Indian languages would translate as a ferry boat, and of the traditional kind, and there's a see-through plastic, and this is the pen. Interestingly, ASA usually gives the freedom of either getting their pens clipped or without a clip. In my case, I have opted for the clipped version, and this is a full Ebonite handmade product made in their workshop in Chennai, India. So let me open. It's a threaded twist mechanism which unwinds in around 5.5 turns. Let me keep the pen aside and look at the cap. So friends, this is the ordinary cigar shaped Ebonite cap that usually is encountered in handcrafted Ebonite pens. So the clip is a steel clip. It's fairly stiff but functional, and the finial is oval shaped. The finial is oval shaped. The inner part of the cap, has a thickness of around 1.5 millimeters. If I can assess it rightly, a millimeter or a millimeter and a half, but it nevertheless looks very tough and sturdy. So this is with regard to the cap, and now we look at the pen. Now there is one disclaimer which I would like to put forward. Most of the pens which are termed full Ebonite pens usually have the gripping section made of plastic. The same is the case here, and in this version of ASA Noka, I am having the threads at the usual classical place where fountain pens have threads. In some versions or editions of ASA Noka, they have very ingeniously threaded this part of the section, and this part in those pens remain almost without any seam, except for an invisible seam somewhere here to open the barrel from the section. So otherwise this pen has, as you can see, a classic cigar shape, but it's more of an angular tapering from the widest girth at the center of the barrel towards the narrower end of the finial at the barrel end. This is the gripping section. If I can focus it for you, I had the option of opting for the Schmidt nib in fine or medium versions, so I had opted for the fine. This is the usual Schmidt nib, German made, with iridium point. So this is with regard to the nib. The feed is made of plastic. The feed is made of plastic, and there is another interesting aspect with regard to this writing section. If I can focus it for you, the inner rim of the gripping section has two circular jackets. We can see their borders, two circular jackets, perhaps as a reinforcement, because this pen is engineered to be an eyedropper as well. So that is it, and these three inner jackets, they usually lend a respectable girth to the writing section. So this is, it's a no nonsense Ebonite pen which is handmade. And if I can focus this part, we have a molded inscription, ASA Daily. Obviously this is meant to be a daily carrier. So this is the pen. Now let me open this. I had also opted for a Schmidt converter with this pen because I am a bit hesitant in using Ebonite pens as eyedroppers, not for the fear of any quality issue as such, but for the simple reason that it holds enormous amount of ink as eyedroppers, and it would take a really long time with a single pen to exhaust an entire barrel that is eyedropped with ink. That is the reason why I usually opt for converters, and they have provided the Schmidt converter, and I'll be using this converter to fill this pen with ink when I give a writing sample. Now to look at the barrel, the barrel's inner rim is thicker than the cap. The thickness is around 2 millimeters or so. So this lends an element of sturdiness to the barrel, which otherwise is without a seam. And if you can see minutely, the barrels do have these microstriated etchings, if I may call it, which comes quite naturally in ebonite rods as they are processed and carved into fountain pen barrels. So there are minor veins which gives it a mattish finish. So this is the barrel of the pen. Now I'll be inking this pen up with pilot blue and take a writing sample. Well friends, I have inked this pen with pilot blue, and before I take a writing sample, I'll be taking a weighing measurement and a size comparison very quickly before I go on to the writing. Now, with regard to the weight of the pen when inked with the cartridge on minus the cap, we get a weight of 15.76 grams without the cap, and the cap in itself is 8.22 grams. So it's a fairly respectable weight and a manageable weight. And with regard to sizes, let me compare this pen size wise with a few commonly used pens that we encounter. This is the Lamy 2000, this is the ASA Nauka, this is our common Pilot high-tech point, this is the Kanwrite Emperor, and this is the TWSBI EcoSport. So clearly ASA Nauka is the longest in terms of the full structure of the pen, but it's not a size that will be discomforting for most users. And now I move on to the writing sample. Well friends, for today's writing sample I am using an 80 GSM paper. The nib is a fine nib, so let me see whether the fine nib interacts fairly with the paper or not. Well, this is a very stiff nib, so there are no line width variations, but I do detect that the nib has a baby's bottom which is slightly hindering the delivery of the ink at a regular speed. So this is something which can be bothering for some users. As you can see, there is an element of baby's bottom that is slightly impacting the ink delivery and its consistency. So I don't know whether it is specific to this nib. Now please remember that they do not manufacture these nibs in-house. This is a Schmidt International nib which they import and fit into these pens. So I'm not sure whether this is a performance issue with regard to this nib alone or with other nibs of the same thickness and size, but for a frequent and a prolific writer or user of this pen, this can be an issue. As you can see, the consistency of thickness is an issue with this pen. The E of the Ebonite, for example, the S and the A of ASA, for example, they are not consistently thick with the rest of the letters. So, well, strictly speaking, if this is with regard to this pen alone, it is definitely a quality issue with regard to the nib. It can be an issue with the nib alone or with the nib feed combination, and perhaps other users may use this pen to see whether they get similar inconsistencies of ink flows. But for me, this is definitely an issue that would bother me if I am using this as a daily writer. So I am not sure, and in any case, the ink that is put into this pen is a fairly wet ink. It's wetter than the average wetness that we usually encounter in fountain pen ink. So I would have expected an element of consistency in ink delivery, but there are areas which apparently do not reflect that consistent ink flow from the converter to the nib end. So this is an issue that I am immediately detecting with this pen. Otherwise, in terms of its physical features, its girth, its weight, this is a perfectly carved, handcrafted piece of Ebonite. So this is an issue which I am finding with this pen, friends. Individual users of ASA may encounter the same or may not encounter the same if they get perfect copies, but somewhere down the line, even if it happens with a single pen, there is an element of quality issue with regard to either the nib or the feed or the nib feed combination. So this is ASA for you, friends. The version that I have got in a fine nibbed Schmidt version with a Schmidt converter as well. So whether I would recommend this or not, it won't be a blanket recommendation clearly, but there would be an element of a disclaimer that the consistency of the Schmidt nibs that we get in ASA can be an occasional issue, even if it is an issue that reveals an element of baby's bottom in the nib. I detect there is an element of baby's bottom which is actually responsible for these inconsistent ink flow, but out of the box, a nib with a baby's bottom is sure to put off a new user of a fountain pen. Thank you friends for watching today's review of ASA Daily. I hope you have enjoyed the review. Keep coming back to this channel to get contents on fountain pens, writing, and the way we use fountain pens of different makes, and see whether these pens can be used or bought with or without bother. Thank you once again friends. I'll be coming back with another pen and another review in a few days. Keep safe. Goodbye.